Vorian Atreides.
After doing God knows what, he's resurfaced, gallivanting around the capital.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Dune Prophecy Episode 3 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references and a couple of seeds that they're laying to reveal, I think, for Vorian Atreides, which is like a really big person in the lore and the history of House Atreides and just the Dune universe in general. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. There's also a bunch of big stuff coming up this week, too, that I'll talk about at the end of the video. But the episode title was Sisterhood Above All, a reference to the motto of the Bene Gesserit and part of the oath of fealty that they swear to the Order when they officially join it. Although we actually don't see her do it, they just imply that she did it at some point after talking to Mother Rachella. But the idea is that it's sisterhood above all for them, loyalty to the Order over their loyalty to their houses. And for a lot of the episode in the flashbacks, Valia is still stuck on getting revenge for her brother's death against the Atreides, along with her sister Tully. A lot of that storyline also sets up the feud between House Atreides and House Harkonnen that gets worse and worse and worse over the 10,000 years to the events of the movies, as we see it still going alive and well in the present day of the Dune universe. They kind of make it seem like Valia is the person that kept that feud alive when it should have died, like her family wanted it to die with them. That was why they had all the talk of this coming back to bite them in the ass in the future about just because this was only going to make things worse, and turns out it did because we've seen the movies. Couple big Game of Thrones cameos that you probably noticed during the episode. Mark Addy is playing her uncle, who they're using as sort of a comp to Baron Vladimir Harkonnen in the future, like the much older version of his character who's on the wheelchair using all that medical technology to survive, kind of like the Baron in present day. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he's not nearly as sadistic or twisted as the Baron is in the future, though. Generally, the flashbacks make him seem like he's a pretty decent person. The other big Game of Thrones cameo is actually a House of the Dragon cameo. It was Oscar Tully who plays one of the young Atreides that Tully winds up allowing to live, which is basically how their family continues. Like, she was killing their entire family except for Oscar Tully. You probably also noticed the last couple of episodes that they're really trying to make Dune Prophecy feel like Game of Thrones in outer space. But they used the episode to give you a bigger deep dive into the Harkonnens this week and to show you more of the backstory for how Valia and Tully wound up joining the Bene Gesserit in the first place. The opening scene starts just after a fight with Desmond, still shaken that the voice didn't work on him and not understanding why. She says that now that she's been banned from the palace, their next move is to shore up their control over the great houses and the Lost Rod so that it doesn't get worse and they don't get kicked out of all the great houses. When she says, this isn't the first soldier to come after me, or it won't be the last, it's just to set up the flashbacks. And I think also to tie this to the longer story, maybe of Vorian Atreides. There were so many Vorian Atreides name drops during the episode and in the previous episode that I feel like the show wants us to remember Vorian Atreides like he might show up in present day. Like, oh yeah, you remember that person we kept mentioning? Boom, here he is. He's secretly been this other person this whole time. I've seen some growing theories now that Desmond might actually be Vorian Atreides just wearing a different face. Like there might be some face dancer twist to the character. Just because during the episode there are all these references to Vorian Atreides disappearing then reappearing all over the universe, and that's kind of what his book story is that they're basing this on. We'll get into that in a little while because some of his backstory also fits with some of the things that Desmond has said about himself too. Then we flash back to Langfield during her younger years prior to joining the Bene Gesserit. They're meant to be in exile handed down from the newly crowned first emperor, Corrino. Now that's like a couple of generations removed from the present emperor right now where she is. They explain it's been about 100 years since the Machine War, so like the original emperor has come and gone. But the whole idea here is this is meant to be the origin of the House Harkonnen, House Atreides feud, where during the final days of the Machine Wars, during the Battle of Corrino, the current Baron Harkonnen, her great-grandfather, who she mentions later in the episode, was accused of abandoning his post, abandoning the rest of the army, but she says that that was all false. But they don't really explain it, so I'm expecting them to reveal more about that, more context, in a future episode. Maybe time with a big reveal about what's going on with Vorian Atreides in present day, just because so much of her getting revenge and correcting the wrong that was visited on their family, the disgrace, has to do with Vorian Atreides himself, because Vorian Atreides was the person who originally accused the Harkonnens at the time from abandoning their post, the whole reason for their disgrace. So Vorian Atreides would be the person to be able to reinstate them. Valia's father is the grandson of the original Baron Harkonnen, the one that was exiled in disgrace. Notice all the furry whales in the background? That's meant to pay off the scene of the current Baron Harkonnen, her nephew, with the Emperor in a previous episode, talking about the merits of all these different parts of the whale that are good for commerce. Like, oh, look at all these different parts we can use. Especially all the whale seed. Really trying to peddle that whale seed around the Lanstrad. Later in the episode, in present day, when she goes back to her quote-unquote family home, it seems a lot more like Gedi Prime though, so by present day, they might have actually transitioned to Gedi Prime. They didn't gain control of that till a little bit later in the timeline. We meet the rest of her immediate family. This is her mother Sonia, her younger brother, who's next in line to become Baron after their father. Mark Addy mentions his hatred of Vorian Atreides, like I said, one of many Vorian Atreides shoutouts during the episode. They make it seem like it's his son that becomes the next Baron eventually because it's Valia's nephew who is the current Baron. So Mark Addy is the current Baron's father. We find out that her brother is going to try and get the Harkonnens a better trade deal at the Lanstrad, which would make them vastly more money and just make it easier for them to get off of Langfield, which it sounds like they eventually did at some point because of the end of the episode on Gedi Prime. Valia wants to take the stabbier tactic. She wants direct revenge. Like, she hasn't even gotten to the Bene Gesserit of it all, or the grand breeding program, or exerting influence on a political scale across the universe. She just wants to go and stab all the Atreides. We find out where Tula's whale tooth came from. Her most prized possession actually came from her brother. They set up the idea that her brother can get Vorian Atreides at the Lanstrad to correct the official Imperial record overturning their exile, but when he returns dead, they automatically assume that it was an Atreides that killed him. That also might wind up becoming a big twist that they pay off later, where they reveal that it was someone else who killed him, or maybe, wait for it, it was the Bene Gesserit order that she eventually wound up joining in the first place, because remember last week where you had the Bene Gesserit on different sides of the same conflict, basically pulling everyone's strings, and they were ultimately behind everything. So early theory, it was actually the Bene Gesserit that ordered her brother to be killed, not the Atreides, which would be, I think, a huge twist, because this long-time feud between their houses were originally started by the Bene Gesserit. We will see. It just feels like there's going to be some Bene Gesserit twist behind the death of her brother that they'll reveal. Later in the episode, Mother Raquella also said that she knew all about her long before they ever actually met. After the death of their brother, their family forces Valia to join the Bene Gesserit against her will. She didn't even want to join at first. And it takes a little while, but eventually she does find purpose there through the rest of the flashbacks that we get in the episode. But we transition back to present day on Seleucus Secundus. We hear all the voices of Valia's ancestors in her head to sort of parallel her undergoing the agony ceremony in the first place back in the flashbacks. Even though they think Lila is lost to them, trapped in a permacoma, that's obviously meant to set up the misdirect where we reveal at the end of the episode that the Bene Gesserit have been using thinking machines this whole time, all part of their grand Kwisatz Haderach breeding program. It all relies on artificial intelligence machines. And they're using a ton of spice to try and bring her out of that coma. It just seems like there's a whole lot more with that plotline they're going to unpack in the rest of the episodes with their thinking machine that's orchestrating this grand Kwisatz Haderach breeding program, because doesn't that raise so many red flags? Like, the machine itself winds up creating this super being that ultimately becomes the downfall of the Order itself. When you trust it to another artificial intelligence machine, which they just defeated during the Machine Wars to also bring about the destruction of their Order. Then Tula has her own flashback to Caladan. They reveal that this is meant to be Caladan because these are the Atreides. They're in the middle of a hunt, and she's basically embedded herself secretly with the Atreides heir, making it seem like she's in love with him. I love the way they played this for a long reveal, too. Like, they wait to the very last moment to reveal that they are the Atreides, and then you suddenly realize what's going on before you see the dead bodies. Like, oh, this can only end one way, and sure enough, boom, they're all dead. R.I.P. Press F to pay respects to most of the Atreides, not Oscar Tully though. He's going to escape and probably become the next duke of their family by default. But the way they explain this whole subplot is that it's part of the infiltration mission to get revenge for the death of her brother that Valia wanted her to do. Like, it's technically Valia's plan that Tula agreed to go along with. They also use the scene to show you how smart and capable she is, particularly with poisons. Then we see Valia in the flashbacks training as an acolyte with the Bene Gesserit under Dorothea, who's her instructor, and they set up the dichotomy between those two characters, that they're opposing viewpoints. There's a bit of a lore dump and a couple mysteries that they sort of weave into this we might learn more about with the future of Dorothea's character too, because remember, Lila will become a Reverend Mother once she comes out, and she'll have access to all of Dorothea's memories as well too, so she'll learn what was really going on with Dorothea that they don't totally reveal in this episode. They explained Dorothea didn't always used to be the way she is. She used to be much more on board with this grand breeding program that her mother had started. But at some point, she was sent to the Lanstrad and House Corrino as an emissary and returned what they call a quote-unquote true believer, true pious, all about servitude to the grand imperial cause. Basically abandoning any real ambition that she had before, but they don't explain what caused her personality to change on a dime so quickly. But the idea is that her mother, Rakella, stopped trusting her after that and stopped thinking of her as the future of their order and pivots to Valia. This might have something to do with what's going on with Vorian Atreides during the series because they tease that he just appears and disappears all over the universe all the time. And in present day, Desmond's whole thing is serving the Imperium like I serve the Imperium above all else. So it just seems like what Desmond is saying and what Dorothea was saying are a little bit similar, so there might be some connection between those two characters. We probably won't get answers about that until Lila comes out of her coma. There are a couple other big lore dumps that they do during this too, where she talks about Dorothea going to the Butlerians, who are the Corrinos essentially in present day. That's why the Machine Wars are called the Butlerian Jihad, because the Butler family led it. After the final battle was won against them on the planet Corrin, they changed their name to the Corrinos with the crowning of the first Emperor Corrino. So when you're talking about the Butlers, you're just talking about the Imperial family basically. They set up her developing the friendship with Mother Rakella when she stands in the rain, refusing to take the oath like all the other sisters until Rakella shows up and invites her in. Her whole speech about losing her husband during the Machine Wars and setting up the idea of pushing through that, her pain causing her to evolve, becoming one of the core tenets of the Bene Gesserit, eventually leading to Valia telling her about her ability with the voice, them developing that together, like her developing the voice with Rakella, and Rakella trusting her with the genetic archive project and the thinking machine that runs it. That almost felt like an even bigger reveal because we knew all about their genetic breeding program, the Kwisatz Haderach program. That's been around in the lore for forever. The fact that it's actually a thinking machine that runs it feels like a relatively new thing. Loved all the scenes with young Tula in the Atreides heir who proposes to her. Like, they want it to feel like a very heartfelt moment, like he does actually love her. And even when she says that she's a Harkonnen, he still says, things will be fine, we'll figure it out, our families, who cares about them? But she's still so bitter, along with Valia, about the death of their brother and believing that it was an Atreides that did it. Like I said, that might be a false belief. It might have been somebody else, like the Bene Gesserit Order themselves, who orchestrated the death of their brother. That she reveals that she killed all the Atreides here. Now, like I said, though, she lets Oscar Tully live, meaning that she didn't kill every single Atreides. Later when we see young Valia telling the other sisters about training them in how to use the voice too, like I was hoping you would ask me how to learn the voice, this is meant to be young Kasha here. Rakella has Valia and Dorothea undergo the agony ceremony, but she can't do it until she resolves things with Tula and her family, basically making up her mind for her. Like, it's much easier for her to fully commit to the order when her family doesn't want to have anything to do with her ever again. Making for a very awkward reunion when she actually goes back to them in the present day. For a second, too, it almost seemed like she was going to make her mother kill herself, but she does stop short. Like, she's bad, but she's not going to be a total monster here. But I love the way they set up the further 10,000 years and just the deepening of the rivalry between the Atreides and the Harkonnen, where they said, your retaliation is going to blow back on us in ways that you can't even imagine yet, which obviously winds up coming true. So part of the idea is that if Valia had been able to let this go and hadn't made Tula kill all the Atreides, the feud between their houses probably would have died out within a couple more 100 years at least. She undergoes the agony, then Tula says that she'll come and join the Order with her because she doesn't want to lose her sister, so they want to be together. The other big Easter egg here too is when her uncle Mark Addy calls her a sorceress. That's a reference to the agony ceremony itself because they use what's called the Rossak poison. That's what that blue liquid is, before they eventually learn how to use the bile of the young sandworms to do it. Part of the idea is that the sorcerers of Rossak created it. Rakella studied under them before creating the Bene Gesserit, so a lot of the Order's methods and techniques, their technology, comes from the sorcerers of Rossak. Maybe we'll get some more references to them on the show, but there's only 6 episodes total, so it's not like they have a ton of time to actually explore that. Then back in present day, Tula quietly, secretly, puts Lila in a life support chamber inside that genetic archive using the thinking machine to keep her alive using the spice. Couple other things of note here. She doesn't tell the other sisters, and remember, Sister Jen, the person who was speaking out against the Order, who seemed like she was very anti-Bene Gesserit the last couple of episodes, continues to be so in this episode. So I feel like they're also building towards some sort of reveal with Jen's character as well, too. We see Valia go back to what might be Gady Prime, like I said, in present day. It just looks like such a stark contrast to where they were at on Lankville in the flashbacks that it seems like now the family has made it to Gady Prime, or gained control of Gady Prime. Her nephew is the current Baron, like I said, who we saw with the Emperor earlier, trying to sell all that whale seed. They're using her uncle Mark Addy now, who's much older, looks like he's about to die, as more of a comp to the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen in present day of the movies, using all that medical technology to survive, floating around all over the place. And I think the statues in their Great Hall here are meant to be for the most famous members of their house, like Valia's great-grandfather, who's the one who started their house in the first place. Then they end the episode showing us the actual thinking machine that's running their grand breeding program, the Kwisatz Haderach program, and gonna keep Lila alive.
Anirul, run diagnostics.
Metabolic activity slowing. Blood pressure 91.
It's called Anirul, which is a reference to a couple things. It's the name of Mother Rakella, like they're using Mother Rakella's name to name the thinking machine, but also it winds up being the name of Irulan's mother in the present day of the movies. They didn't really explore her mother too much during Dune Part 2, but her mother was also Bene Gesserit just like her. But we get a much larger look at these thinking machines systems. Like all these electronic systems are the thinking machine itself, all of its hardware and software operating. That's why it's talking to her like a person is talking to her.
This is not an authorized request.
Mother Valia is off planet. She entrusted me with the key. I order you to keep this child alive.
So at least from a lore perspective, probably the biggest reveal of the episode is that this whole Kwisatz Haderach program that lasted for tens of thousands of years in the Bene Gesserit is actually been run by a thinking machine itself. There's a bunch of Easter eggs and references during the episode, so if there's any that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. In my full episode 4 video, we'll post next week. Really big reminder too, this week Star Wars Skeleton Crew Episode 1 and Episode 2 are starting. I'll be doing videos for all those Creature Commandos episodes in the DC universe. It's also the beginning of James Gunn's DCU as well too. It's meant to be canon to the Superman movie. And we're going to get What If Season 3 episodes later this month. So there's like a lot of really big stuff happening in December. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss any of that stuff. Everybody click here to learn about that brand new Wolverine vs. Hulk movie that Marvel is working on, and click here for all my Dune episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.